On this episode, we're joined by Kyle Scott Laskowski, the founder of CrossingBroad.com and the co-host of Monetize Media, where he and his co-host discuss how creators grow and monetize their audience. This was a special episode for me. I was a huge fan of the site Kyle founded, CrossingBroad.com, and for anyone from the Philadelphia area or a fan of Philadelphia sports, this site was special. Kyle describes it in our episode as the TMZ of Philly sports. I knew it as the place to go to find out the real stories behind the standard press conference answers that we'd hear in the media. So it was a great site, loved it growing up and still love it today. So Kyle joined to tell the story of building CrossingBroad.com, the mistakes he made in monetizing early on, and the lessons that operators can take as we go build media platforms and companies today. As I mentioned, Kyle is also the host of Monetize Media, where he discusses how creators can best monetize their content and turn their audiences into businesses. So we get deep into that as well. This is a great episode with lots of depth, some very accurate and unfortunate Sixers predictions from Kyle and I, and a ton of lessons learned for anyone building a media brand today. Let's get into this episode with Kyle Scott Laskowski. All right, we are back with another episode. This episode, we've got Kyle Scott from a lot of places, originally from Crossing Broad, now talking about Monetize Media. But Kyle, thanks for spending time with us.
Adam, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
All right, so before we get into like the career thing and everything, I don't really get to talk Philly sports much on here. Although, you know, people probably know how I feel. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Where are the Sixers going? Do you think they'll close it out in 6, or are we headed for trouble?
I don't know if they're going to close it out in 6, and I don't know when this episode will air, so hopefully this makes me look smart. But I like them in this series. I think Kyle Lowry is going to be out, and I'm a Villanova guy, so I feel like that probably hurts Miami, although the way he's played, maybe not. But yeah, I like where the Sixers are going. They're an entirely different team with Embiid, and if you just get a little bit of old James Harden, they got a real shot this year to go all the way. But you need like old James Harden, not like 2022 the James Harden to show up.
Game 4, James Harden.
Yes.
More of that. Yeah. Well, I hope we'll know in a few hours whether you're right or wrong. I'm nervous. I think things are too peachy right now. So just knowing how this team goes, I think we're up for some rough waters maybe ahead, but we'll see. But that kind of just leads into you know, what you've been able to do with your career, and obviously starting Crossing Broad. Anyone who grew up in or around the Philadelphia area, I try to explain it to other people, and sometimes I think they think I'm you know, exaggerating, but sports is just such a huge part of being from the area. Everybody wants to work in sports in some fashion or another, and you actually did it in starting Crossing Broad. How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. You really can't explain Philly to people until you're here, and it's such a provincial town, and people just grow up with sports as a part of their lives. So I always wanted to go into sports media, and had, you know, wanted to be a journalist. Worked in ad sales at the Inquirer, mistakenly thinking that could get me into like the writing side. Did some internships at Comcast Sportsnet, which is the local sports network, and I realized like I'm not a good employee. I'm not a great 9-to-5 guy, right? And some of those people are working crazy hours for low pay. So for every Dan Patrick and Keith Olbermann you see, there's like 100 people behind the scenes that are making a fraction as much, working terrible hours. And I was like, this isn't for me. So I went into sales. I worked in some digital marketing. I worked at GSI Commerce, which is kind of now Fanatics. So I had some experience in like the ad sales, the apparel, the monetization piece. And I knew I always wanted to get into like content. And I had started a few sports blogs over the years, like starts and stops throughout like the mid-aughts, the early 2000s, and then created one in 2009 called Crossing Broad. And I tried to be a little bit different. We were like TMZ meets Barstool meets Deadspin meets like real sports news. And it was just something different that people in Philly weren't used to. And it stuck right away. And it's kind of off. Once you get a little traction with something like that, that's your passion. You just got to like go all in. And that's kind of what I did.
Yeah, it's awesome. It was, I remember clearly reading Crossing Broad over the years. And at one point it was, or maybe it still is, it was the largest independent media site. Is that right? In Philly?
Yeah, I like to think so. I mean, not everywhere publishes their numbers, but just in terms of like, you know, getting a sense of the lay of the land, know what's in Philly, I feel like we were the biggest, certainly in sports. You have like these SB Nation sites that are part of a network that get pretty good audiences, but
right.
we're like truly, for a while, we're truly independent.
So I want to talk more about what you're doing now, but I have to just dig in a little bit. Sports is so competitive, and Philly sports is incredibly competitive. What did you do in the early days? Maybe even things that didn't scale long term, but were crucial to getting some inertia early on.
Yeah, I think being the TMZ thing is probably the best way to
Okay.
describe it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we got a lot of heat. Philly's a sports town, and you'll hear from people in sports media that there's no online community like there is in Philly. Just
Hmm.
people on Twitter, podcasts, and back in the day it was bloggers. And it was like this tight knit community, and no one was really approaching it like a business. And I kind of came in and was like, there's a lot of people who care about this. I can get enough of an audience and then figure out a way to make a living off of it. And
Right.
so I approached it more competitively or combatively than some other bloggers. And I
Mhm.
think my way of doing it was like, we're going to be TMZ. We're going to write about like which Flyers are out partying. And, our big story, we broke the story of Riley Cooper was,
Right.
used a racial slur at a concert, and it, was on
Huge story.
Sports Center within hours. And like, we're going to do that and be different. We're going to talk sports too. But I always use the example, people in Philly, it's such a sports town that more people spend time consuming like the local sports talk radio guy than actually watching the game. So we started
100%.
covering the media personalities, and that made
Mm.
us a lot different. And some of the media hated us for that, and some of them liked it, but it gave us an audience, whereas everybody else was just talking about the X's and O's. And you always got to kind of like find your pocket, and that was ours. Long term, though, it did make it more difficult when we
Mm.
tried to create like a subscription business. We didn't go deep. We went like shallow on a lot of topics. So we
Mhm.
went for like breadth more than depth. And then when it came time to like try and compel people to subscribe for a paid product, it was tough because we weren't like deep into the weeds on the Sixers or
Sure.
the Eagles, so it was good and bad. It gave us scale, but it kind of meant that certain business models were never going to work for us in terms of like deep knowledge on one area.
Right. Well, I mean, in fairness, back then, I don't think being verticalized to one sport was as common as it is today. Like now, you've got the athletic, you've got a bunch of people who do like the athletic MBA or whatever. Writes Ricky Sanchez just basketball. At the time, everybody did everything, so that seems like it'd be normal. But going about it the way that you did and talking about whether it be lifestyle or different things, did that make it difficult to like, because sports is so contingent on who your sources are, your relationships. Was it difficult to establish those player relationships? Did they have any like hold you at arm's length at all?
They did. I mean, the team certainly did. It took us years till we started to get credentials, like 2016, 17. It was about 6 or 7 years before we were able to even
Wow.
have that conversation. And some teams were more receptive than others. We never really, I always wanted to be away from the arena. It wasn't until we started hiring more
Right.
people and they wanted to like get credentialed. Because for us, it was better. There was, you go down to an Eagles game, there's like 50 local reporters there. No
Right.
exaggeration. It's crazy. It's those guys are like, they think they're covering the White House, right?
Mhm.
And it's true, man. I mean, it's a different breed. So we're
Yeah.
like, we're going to keep an arm's length and we're going to comment on that stuff. Some of the stuff that they're doing, some of the stuff the media is doing. And
Yeah.
I think we've seen this recently, even with mainstream media, like choose your cable news fighter, right? But they comment on what the other media, the media on the left, the media on the right,
Yeah. Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter. We kind of started doing that early. So for me, access not only wasn't necessary, and a lot of times we didn't want it. And because it
Gotcha.
allowed us to kind of, frankly, take pot shots, but also just kind of speak truth and be irreverent and have some fun and really approach it like the fan watching from home or the fan at the game. Some of our most popular stories were about the new beers at Citizens Bank Park or, some gaffe on, the local post game show. And it's not like totally groundbreaking. Barstool and Deadspin were doing that. But at the time, on a local level, there wasn't a whole
Mm.
lot of that. And now, though, you have every mainstream outlet has like a factory of 22-year-old content writers monitoring this stuff 24/7. And we couldn't compete. Like our edge was gone by like 2015 in terms of like, hey, we're going to post this crazy screenshot that happened in the game because now mainstream media is thinking that way and they have more resources to throw at it.
Yeah.
So then we started becoming like a bit more personality driven at that point
Yeah. I mean,
instead of
now it's
viral
just
clip driven.
everyone sees it live. The other night during the Sixer game, dude fell asleep in the front row. It was seconds. As soon as I saw the scene on TV, I was like, I mean, this is going to be killer in a few seconds, and it was.
And in 2010, that would have been us and it would have been Deadspin and
Yeah.
maybe like one outlet. now it's on Bleacher Report, NBC picks it up because
Right.
they know like
Right.
they've kind of stolen the playbook from blogs.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and to your point about the local thing, I think that's so interesting. I'm seeing that more and more across. I'm down in Greenville, South Carolina now. We have a company here called 6 a.m. City that's really turned the daily newspaper into like they're like morning brew for very local mid-sized cities. And I'm curious to see how that continues to expand because like you said, the traditional topic based reporting and even now the slant stuff or the off the field stuff or whatever, all those things kind of ubiquitous. But when you get super hyper local, it's harder for bigger people to be competitive in that. So I think that's still an area that has more for content creators to investigate, and I'm curious to see how that unfolds over time.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that company. I find it very interesting what they're doing. And I've thought like, hey, what's next for us? And one of the things I kind of thought is like, hey, can we do something else local? There is that you can create a niche or get people who are really knowledgeable in a community. Where the problem with local is, from my experience, and it's not for everybody, it's hard to find the right business model. It took us years and kind of the legalization of sports betting to make this a scalable business, which you talk about in a bit. But for years, like I was knocking on the doors of bars in Old City, Philly, trying to sell ads. Right. And it was me and it was like one other person for 5 or 6 years. And the response was always, cool. Can you get people into the bar? Right. It's like, yeah, we can. But like, I want to just show your ad on the website. I can't come out every night. I was hosting Quizzos for drinkers in Old City. So I'd be blogging all day. And then like 2 nights a week, I would go host a Quizzo because that's what they needed. They needed my ability to bring a crowd, right? That's not scalable. And it's like you're nickel and diming. I remember McFadden's down at Citizens Bank Park paid us for a Super Bowl party, like out of cash, like under the table, and then like extorted us to give half of it back to their bartenders as a tip. And it's like, okay, this is not a scalable model. We need something else. And we eventually got into apparel, but local's tough because your ad sales, you're not dealing with like a big agency. You're going like mom and pop and bars, and it's it's a different type of like relationship there.
I love that though. I love how you were able to do those things that were unscalable, those things that were not fun in the moment, but obviously paid off. So you and your partner were able to sell CrossingBroad eventually to Excel Media. Tell us a little bit about that process and what you're doing with them now.
Yeah. So for a long time, CB was me. And in 2017, I took on a couple of local guys as investors so we can hire, if you follow like Kevin Kincaid, he's our Sixers writer, and some of the other guys to really help me focus on growing the business. So at first we tried that subscription thing, I talked about earlier, and we realized, oh, wow, we don't go deep anywhere. And we got a few hundred subscribers. Like this isn't a scalable model. So then we went into apparel, and it was more of an opportunistic thing. The Eagles were starting to get good. They won the Super Bowl, and we sold like a lot of shirts, but again, not scalable. It was me stuffing shirts in my garage for like 6 weeks. No joke. Tens of thousands of Philly special shirts going out and stuffed by me and like some neighborhood kids. But then really everything changed, I think, for sports media in general with the overturning of PASPA, which is the Supreme Court ruling that effectively made it allowed states to legalize online sports betting. Yeah. And I had this weird background of like digital marketing and affiliate marketing and knew, oh my God, like gambling companies spend a lot of money to acquire a new customer, hundreds of dollars for a single customer. And it just so happened for us that Pennsylvania and New Jersey were the first 2 states to legalize this. And I was like, okay, our audience is ripe for this. We have some tactical abilities. So I found a partner, a guy named Jason Zernicki, who was a big affiliate in Daily Fantasy, also happens to be in Doylestown, PA. We synced up in 2018 and we're like, okay, you got a skill set as an affiliate. I got a content and audience skill set. Let's work together. So we took CB in-house. He had some SEO sites. We bought a site in New York that was a little more forward-looking for when they legalized, which they just did. And then we started partnering with other sports blogs around the country, like Mile High Sports in Denver, Bleacher Nation in Illinois. And we created this betting affiliate content for them. And it's a whole different level of revenue generation, and made it a business more than like it made it a scalable business instead of a lifestyle business. Sure. And then we started to get acquisition offers, and then, we said no to the first few. And then eventually they offer you enough that you kind of have to say yes.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't realize that. I didn't know you guys were tied into Bleacher Nation. That's awesome. Those are big, reputable sites. So You sold to Excel, and you're working with them currently in the is it daily fantasy, or I guess still sports gambling content creation stuff?
Yeah, so we have a number of sports, so we keep those partnerships. So we still own Crossing Broad and Elite Sports New York, similar type site. We try to find similar sites around the country, like Bleacher Nation, Chicago, and so on and so forth. But now we've seen mainstream media and newspapers actually realizing how much money is in like sports
Mm.
betting advertising dollars, and the most lucrative part of that we think is the affiliate opportunity, because they're it's hundreds of dollars to refer a new customer. So we're now working with, we just announced a partnership today or yesterday with cleveland.com, which is like the
Wow.
main domain in Ohio. Yeah. And our team goes in and we create, game previews, how to bet on the, I was going to say the Indians, the Guardians game tonight and things like that. And they have a link to, DraftKings and FanDuels of the world. And it's a really good revenue opportunity for sports media. And it's great for the sports books because they only pay if they get
Right.
performance, if they actually get the referral of a new
So
customer.
that's where the affiliate part comes in. You're not doing it as a branded partner, content partner of DraftKings, where they own all your content. You're giving a link, and the consumer can kind of decide. Is that right? Yeah.
Exactly. So if you take Crossing Broad, like we had our Sixers and Eagles content, and then we'd layer in a post about how to bet on the Eagles game. Here are the sports books you could use. Here are the betting promos. And we're like, oh, this works. And it works really well on Crossing Broad. And that's like, hey, we should buy another site or partner with other sites to help them. And it helped me because I had been the lead blogger on the site for like 5 or 6 years. And when you're doing content all day, every day, and I've heard some other guests at your show say the same thing, like all you think about is
Right.
content all day long. And the business sometimes comes second. So we went to like some of these other bloggers around the country and we're like, listen, I get it. I've been there. You're spending all day blogging about the Cubs or the Broncos, and you're not thinking about how to make the best affiliate business. So let us come in. We have a team of people that can create this betting content, and it makes, for some of our partners has really changed, I think their trajectory too. And, way more than like programmatic ad
So
dollars
smart.
or anything
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've curious. This is just like a sidebar, but what's your thought on? So, for instance, Game 3 of the Sixers Heat series, Embiid was questionable, and then he was out, and at the last second, the Sixers put him in the lineup, and I think they just took some fine for not having disclosed that he was going to play earlier. And the Suns did it either this round or last round with Devin Booker. Do you see that? Like, it seems like it would have a direct implication on like people like what you're doing, or obviously the gambling sites themselves. Do you think we're gonna see some changes in those things?
Yeah, I think you're going to see leagues crack down harder on it. I know they find the Sixers,
Right.
$50,000 to an NBA team is probably not going to move the needle, but you're going to see them crack down on it. It's a story today. I just saw someone on Twitter talking about how the NHL still, discloses injuries like we're in the dark ages, lower body or upper body, and it's actionable. It's actionable info now. So all these leagues that wanted to stay away from betting forever, I just saw the Sixers tweet on the day of a playoff game an ad for their custom branded blackjack
Wow.
game with one of the local casinos.
So
Like,
crazy.
we're in a whole new world. So much gambling money is flooding into sports in every facet that, the leagues know they have to be putting out good
Yeah.
information. They've been the ones trying to lead the charge, trying to claim they needed integrity fees from the sports books.
Right.
But if it's their own teams and players who are sort of holding back information, you're going to see them crack down on it, because that's where the
Yeah,
dollar is
yeah,
really.
makes sense. Okay, so you've done all that. You're doing that now, still with Excel. You just told us right about the announcement. But there's something on the horizon. You and your partner, I think, are starting a new site together. Tell us a little bit about that. I think it's called Monetize Media.
Yeah, yeah. So it's monetize.media, and we're it's really set up to be a podcast, and then we kind of look to grow a brand off the backs of it. And it's about really what we just talked about: how to monetize if you have a following of any kind, be it on TikTok, a blog, a podcast, right? Our belief is that if you go back hundreds of years, even to like the biblical times, right? Anyone who had an audience had like a small handful of ways
Mhm.
to really make a living off that audience. You can get, supporters, which would take the form of donations or Patreon. You could get subscribers. You could take that all the way forward to the radio era, the newspaper era, and now online. If you have a number of people consuming your content, you have to think about what type of people um, they are, what type of audience you have. Does it go deep or does it go wide, right? If it goes wide, you monetize differently than if you have like I got like a coconut water
Right.
here, right? Like if you specialize in coconut water, you could charge a subscription for the 8 people who need to know everything about coconut water, right? So we think there's only like a handful of business models. And the idea is to talk to creators who are out there putting out content, whether it's written, audio, video, it doesn't matter. And then like really dive deep into their business model and how to own the audience. You hear about so many people who have making a ton of money on Instagram or on YouTube, and it's like, okay, but if that dries up, um, do you own your audience? Do you have a true business model? And it took me almost a decade to kind of figure out a way to do that. But that's what that's kind of what we want to pull out of other people and do and make it valuable for the audience, so everybody can learn from somebody else that, hey, what this works for them in their vertical, I can might be able to apply to my vertical, even if it's entirely unrelated.
Yeah, this is awesome. So tell me about how you came up with this. I assume it's from your Crossing Broad experiences, but how did you all formulate the idea for Monetize, and how did you see that as a pain point?
Yeah, I mean, look, we kind of sat down one day and said, hey, we're not going to be at our current company forever. We kind of get here and have an agreement to stay on for a period of time and kind of grow this opportunity. And it's still big, but in the future, what do we want to do? And, could we create a new media site in sports or somewhere else? Yeah, we could, right? And we could operate a site, but we're a success story now. Like, hey, we had this really interesting exit in this kind of high profile business model, and we've learned a lot of things. And the two of us have a really kind of unique content and digital marketing skill set. And like, hey, we love when we get on partner calls, we love like talking to our partners for 2 hours sometimes just about like their business model and their audience. It has nothing to do with like our direct partnership. And we're like, wow, we really enjoy this. Why don't we just like find other people that have audiences and do this as a podcast, and then see what opportunities it opens for us down the road. I mean, certainly we could monetize the podcast itself.
Sure.
We wouldn't be doing a service to the name if we didn't
Yeah,
do
become a
that.
little
But
bit meta.
you know, yeah, exactly. But we think it might open up some consulting, investing, advisory opportunities. So that's really the end goal.
Very cool. All right, good. So this is I didn't fully understand the concept, but this is perfect timing. I just got into a little bit of an argument on LinkedIn and Twitter yesterday over this topic. So I believe that advertising specifically is, I think I know you're going to say it's width versus depth, but advertising can be a lazy monetization effort if it's just what you go to immediately, which is what a lot of people do. Like a lot of people start a show and then immediately are looking for advertisers or giving away advertisements to generate interest, et cetera. And my point was, with our business, for instance, through this show, we 5x'd our revenue over a 2-year period between 2017 and 2019 with no advertisements. It was through the people that we invited to come on, the types of content that we created, the partnerships, like all the behind the scenes stuff of the content business was how we generated our revenue. And, it wasn't a ton of revenue, but we're talking about a jump from initially when we very first started $100,000 a year to just over $500,000 a year annual recurring revenue in that 2-year period. And so my point was, if you just jump to advertising, you're missing everything else. What was I wrong? What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, I could share like some anecdotes just from the past and how I think about it. Early on, like within 6 months of launching Crossing Broad, I had like 30,000 impressions per month, right? It's like, it felt like a lot. It was 1,000 a day. At the time, it was a lot. In hindsight, it really wasn't, right? And I was like, all right, this probably has a worth of maybe like $5 to $10 in CPM revenue per day or something. But I tried to throw in an event with a local sponsor. I was like, oh, I can bring all these people. I got 30,000 impressions, right? 2 people showed up, right? And I spent weeks, instead of putting content on the site about the Phillies at the time, who were really good. They were in the World Series. They were the best team in baseball. I was promoting this event at Lucky Strike in Center City, and 2 people showed up. And I think you could sour an audience that way. And it's also not the most scalable model. It's easy to sometimes advertising in any format, you can kind of take the programmatic ad dollars. And if you have enough scale, if you're a YouTuber who gets millions of views, then it's a lot of money, right? But it's almost never the best or only business model. Advertising is a great part of any mix, don't get me wrong. And I think a good podcast ad is as effective as any ad. But it's rarely the very best business model. We were relying on some program through Google back in like 2015, and it was like 80% of my personal income. And Google just decided, hey, we're going to put this inventory on our own sites now, like YouTube and Google Play. And some of their other stuff, and cut out publishers like 98%. So I went from literally like $500 a day we were pulling in from that to like literally $2
Wow.
a day. And it was like, wow, okay, I need something that's more
Yeah.
sustainable. And that kind of forced us to think about apparel and affiliate and like, how can we really monetize our audience more effectively? So I think it's a part, not
Sure.
the only part.
So, okay, given what we just talked about with advertising, obviously that's one extreme. B2B, relationship driven monetization is not even really content monetization in the traditional sense. Do you have a favorite? You said there's lots of different models. Do you have a favorite model that you believe in or evangelize as you're going through this?
I really think it depends on the type of content
Sure.
and audience. And it's not even just, depth versus breadth. It really just, it's your vertical, right? If you're in a, what we're trying to do with Monetize Media, for example, is more like B2B consultant type work. And if we could get really one strategic partner or client out of that down the line, 40 episodes of podcasts may have been worth it, right? To establish that credibility to get it. Whereas if you have a sports website, it's really doesn't have like a value in the actual world, right? It's really, you're covering entertainment. So you're going to get the beer advertisers. Luckily now for people in sports, you're getting those gambling advertisers who are spending big, right? But most, it really is about the vertical. What kind of information are you putting out? And then how valuable is that information? And if it's valuable information, I think your options to monetize are a bit more scalable because you can charge subscriptions or get consulting or opportunities out of that. And if it's just more like surface level stuff, then that's where I think you got to default to like advertising and more just traditional affiliate stuff to kind of piece it all together, brand deals.
Yeah. Like the consulting, the B2B stuff is super under the radar. I think still, even though there's still people there's a lot more people talking about now than there was 5 years ago. I still think it's an underrated asset. One thing
and I like products too, by the way. Like I think you look like Mr. Beast is a great example. Like my kids know him as the guy who has the burgers down the shore. Like you buy a Mr. Beast burger. And you're seeing I think he uses a service called Pop Chew. And there's some of these services that allow these creators to create a product, like not just white label, but have their hands in creating it. And it's almost different. Like it used to be brands would pay people with an audience to advertise to them. Now you could almost do the reverse. You could build your audience and then you could say, all right, what is my audience like? And I can create a product and do it the other way around, where the people with the audiences are the ones who in the future have the products, not vice versa.
I'd imagine within that's another model where scale is pretty necessary to be able to even have those conversations. Would you?
Yeah, unless it's like some high value product, I think. If you have an audience of 1,000, but you're like, this is where you go to courses or something. But if you're talking about like, say I have an audience of 1,000 people subscribe to your newsletter and your newsletter is about orthopedic surgery on like the ulnar bone, right? You probably have a lot of doctors who would pay premium top dollar for your information or to get you to come in and work with them or something like that. Like, so I do think it depends on the niche.
You know a lot about the ulnar bone. Is that a specific injury you've had? That was
I did. I actually, I don't know if you can see it here. I did. I broke it playing roller hockey. I got punched in the face and broke my wrist.
Jeez, that's awful.
I
terrible
out of my skates. Yeah.
One thing you said when you were kind of going through that initial description was you said there's different, there's supporters, there's subscribers, and then there's advertisers. Just because I haven't heard supporters used as often, is there an interesting anecdote or somewhere you've seen that being used effectively, the supporter model?
Yeah. So I'm not trying to plug our show, but one of the people we spoke to early on was a guy called Kenny Coleman, who started Bourbon Pursuit. It's a podcast all about bourbon, right? And I consider they had a lot of Patreon subscribers, but more supporters. They really didn't get much for being a supporter other than like a t-shirt and things like that. Didn't really get them more content, but it was people who really appreciated what he was doing. We're like, hey, I'm going to give you $10 a month so you could do this as a living and put out more content. To me, that's a supporter versus someone who has to actually pay to receive the content. If someone's willing to just do it out of the kindness of their heart because they like you and want to support the mission, like that's kind of where I draw that distinction. But he was able to lever that up into now he's creating his own whiskey brand and they're distilling and aging whiskey. So those early supporters gave him enough juice to be able to, do this full time, basically.
Yeah.
And now he's been able to put his effort into, he's literally going to distill and age for 5 years his whiskey, which is a very capital intensive process. So supporters are necessary sometimes.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great example. Well, Kyle, it's been great getting to talk with you. I appreciate you coming and sharing all of what you have with us. Kind of last two questions. The first is just, what is and maybe it's just the creator economy on the whole, but what's a content trend or you know a business model trend online that just has you super excited at the moment? And then be sure to tell us where we can follow all the stuff that's coming out with Monetize Media, the show, all those things.
Yeah, sure. I think the products one is really interesting to me because for a long time, creators it was always like t-shirts, apparel, right? And that's what we, because it was easy. You could find, you could
Right.
go to Spreadshirt or Shopify and quickly drop ship shirts. But I think now there's companies that can help facilitate people with audiences creating products related to the niche, which I think takes the business ramifications rather than relying on a brand's dollars. You can be the brand. I think that's really huge.
Hmm.
And for me, subscriptions is one that's like, it's really trendy right now. But like, if you look at the Netflix, what's happened with Netflix lately,
Yeah.
that's premium content. And even they reach their apex and there's only so many more people you can get. And I wonder if at a certain point, how many people are going to keep subscribing and paying for a $5 newsletter or $10 newsletter? Like eventually, I'm probably paying like $150 a month on newsletters, right? Like
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
not sustainable. So that to me, I don't want to say it feels played out, but I think you need to watch that. Like it's not the only model, and the product thing excites me, I think.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the next chess move on that is. Because to your point, I mean, newsletters is one thing, and similarly, I probably have 5 or 10 that I subscribe to. Then there's like, between Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, HBO, Netflix, Hulu, like you could accidentally be signed up for like 10 or 12 of these streaming services, all for $15, $20 a month. And I think it just seems like it's probably going to take longer than we think, but it seems like people are going to come to their senses and be like, this is costing me way more than it did when I was bundled back in the before times. So I am curious what the next move of that is, if there's curation services or, I don't know what it is, but that's super interesting to me as well.
Yeah, there's Ben Thompson who runs Stratechery, like talks about tech and stuff, and he always says everything is bundling and unbundling and bundling again, and
Yeah.
Eventually you just get back to the point where you're gonna, like, I think the cable companies are sitting pretty right now, because you're right. You sit down like once every 3 months and you like look at your bills and you're like, okay, Netflix isn't that much, but when I add it together, I'm between my internet, my phone, I'm spending like $400 a month on some level of subscription just for
Crazy.
content. It's
Yeah.
it's not sustainable.
Kyle, thanks so much. Where can people keep up with all the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they can go to crossingbroad.com for the Philly sports news. The new thing is at monetize.media. We're launching it on May 17th. We have, I think, our first 4 episodes recorded. So it'll be Monetize Media and all your podcast players. You can follow that on Twitter. It's brand new, Monetize Media HQ. And me, I'm at Kyle Scott L on Twitter, all one word.
Cool. And we'll be sure to link all of that below. Thanks so much for coming on, Sixers and Six.
Yeah, I have 7 maybe, but yeah,
Maybe
go
7.
Sixers.
Good to have you. Thanks.